Good morning. I'm Nancy Sawyer. This is a Pay It Forward 365 talk brought to you by Life Coach University. So Life Coach University is a platform where there are lots of different talks available from different coaches on different topics. Everything is free. It's a Pay It Forward platform. Our mission is to coach millions more. So everything is free, and all we ask is that you pay it forward any way you'd like to. One way you could do it is by sharing this link with a friend or letting a friend know about Life Coach University. Check out the campus there. There's lots of stuff to dive into based on whatever you want to learn about. So I am Nancy Sawyer. I am the Coach of the Month for November. I am a certified coach who helps people to master midlife. And what that means is sometimes in midlife, we go through challenging events, challenging situations, or sometimes we just wake up one day and we say, gee, my life isn't what I thought it would be. How did I get here? And we need some guidance how to move forward or step into our next chapter. So that's what I do when I work with my clients, is help them figure that out and rediscover themselves, rediscover their joy, get back into who they were before these traumatic events happened. So that's what I do. And you can find me at nancybsawyer.com. I want to let you know that there's a Q&A in the bottom of your screen, and you can put comments or questions there. I'm going to go through my talk, and then at the end, I'll check the questions and answer any questions that are in there. Okay, so today is day 19, and our topic today is calling out your self-talk. You've heard me mention, if you've been on any of my other talks, about that negative loop in your head, right? We've talked about self-care and how our words create our reality. And as we work towards mastering midlife, we want to begin to master the noise that's in our heads. I call it noise because that's what most of it is. There's a lot of research out there about how many thoughts we have per day as humans. Depending on the study you look at, the numbers say from 6,200 up to 70,000 thoughts per day. Regardless of the total amount, what we know is that about 95% of your thoughts on any given day are the same ones as the day before. So if we think about that, that doesn't seem very helpful for moving forward, does it? So I want you to ask yourself, what are these thoughts? What are my thoughts? What is your brain thinking all day long? Are they positive thoughts? Are they supportive thoughts? Not only are there just individual thoughts, there's also a story, a narrative we have in our head about who we are, what our potential is, what we're capable of. What is your story? What's that story you're telling yourself in your head? You know, I want you to know you're the person you talk to the most. There is that constant loop in your head, okay? So we want to begin to pay attention to what you're telling yourself. As I say quite often, you know, in coaching, one of the most important things is to shut off that autopilot and start paying attention. We want to start noticing what's going on around me, what's going around in my head, what's going on in my environment. So we want to stop, pause, and notice and get curious. So if we begin to pay attention to that story that's in our head, what's coming up for you? Is it negative? Is it limiting beliefs? Is that voice in your head a cheerleader or a naysayer? So previously on day 9, we talked about how our words create our reality. I want to dig a little deeper into this and talk about how the story we tell ourselves creates our reality, the story in our head. I'm going to share a personal story and a realization I had. Several years ago, I went through a really difficult time. I had been through several traumatic events in a short period of time. I lost my mom to cancer. I then experienced separation and divorce. And then just after that, I had a dear friend die in a very violent manner. All of this happening in a short period of time significantly affected my emotional state. I realized that I was suffering from depression. I reached out and tried to get a therapist. And I called 5 therapists and not one of them called me back. So what I realized for myself was that I was in a place where I pretty much had to deal with this myself while I was waiting to find a therapist that could fit me in. So what I did, I started reading a lot of spiritual texts. I would spend hours each morning reading, journaling, reflecting, meditating. I did this as a morning routine as I was trying to figure out what was going on for me and how to pull myself out of it. One day I had a realization. I realized that much of my journaling, because I did go back and I would read it back, what I had written the day before, the week before, and I was looking for patterns. I was looking for anything that I could figure out, right? So one day I realized much of my journaling was talking about how I was in so much pain. I was saying, why am I in so much pain? Why is life so painful? Why is it so difficult? I would ask myself these questions. I'd reflect on this. And one day I realized, after a meditation, I realized that the story in my head said I'm in pain. So I woke up every day and I told myself I'm in pain. I realized that every day when I woke up, I was creating that reality. I was creating my emotional state of pain. This story I had in my head created my experience of life. So I wondered if I began telling myself a different story, if I began talking about the good things that are in my life, would I feel differently? So what I did was I began a gratitude journal. I started writing down what I was thankful for. It was pretty hard to find things at first. I began to journal about what was good in my life. I began to journal about the lessons I had learned from my experiences and the difficulty I had been through. And slowly my depression began to lift. After that, I began exploring more about the stories I told myself, and I began calling out my negative thoughts. So I ask you, is the story that you're telling yourself in your head something that is creating a negative experience of life? And if so, what would happen if you started telling yourself a different story? So I look at it as, you are not your thoughts, and you can challenge your thoughts. So let's think about this. How can you flip the script? When we have negative thoughts, right? I'm no good at this. I'll never be able to get all of this done. Life is so difficult. What we can do is write them down. You want to call out these thoughts. You want to write them down. And then you want to question them. You want to ask yourself, is this true? Is this actually true? You can take the thought and you can challenge it. You can rewrite them into a positive statement. So instead of life is so difficult, you can write or say, life is pretty great. Or you can say, life can be challenging, but I've got the skills to deal with it. See that shift in that narrative? As I worked through this myself in challenging and rewriting the scripts, part of me began to question, well, am I lying? Am I a liar? Like, what if I don't think life is pretty great right now? I had to kind of suspend my belief for a minute and think about it as I am creating my reality. What I say will be true. I turned myself into a creator of my life instead of a victim of the negative stories in my head. Several years ago, I also had a business coach. And one of the things I often brought to her in our weekly meetings was, there's so much to do. I'll never get all of it done. And she worked with me on rearranging that thought And what I came up with was, there is enough time in the day to get everything done that I need to. My business coach was very helpful in that because she helped me flip that script. And when I sat down at my computer and looked at my to-do list, and when I said, there is enough time in the day to get everything done, then I was able to move forward and start doing the work. You see, when you're in that negative loop, it keeps you in the negative loop. I'll never be able to get all this done. And you go down that rabbit hole, right? Oh my gosh, this is awful. I'm never going to be able to do it. But while you're going down that rabbit hole, you're not actually doing any action. And this is how it plays out, right? You're so busy telling yourself that you can't do anything. You're stealing that time away from yourself. You're not actually doing anything because you're too busy telling yourself you can't do anything. So when we can stop that, interrupt the pattern, that helps us to take the action that will move us forward. So pay attention to the sentences that are on that loop in your head. If there are negative thoughts that you have in your head, put them in the chat. I'd love to hear what yours are. Mine often say, I'm not good enough for this. I'm not worthy. There's not enough time. I'll never get this all done. I'm going to fail anyway. Why even try? These are all the ones that are in my head all day long. I'm doing a much better job now of pushing them away, and I'm going to tell you how we can do that in a couple minutes. So what we want to do, we want to challenge them. They're not real, okay? I want you to be kind to yourself. You're human. It's completely natural to have negative thoughts. Our goal here is to reduce them and not let them stop you from taking action, positive forward action that will move your life forward. So you can challenge them. You can challenge them with humor, right? Let's be real and honest. Like I just said, if you're too busy telling yourself you can't do something, then you're actually not even doing the thing, right? So that voice in your head that's saying, I'll never get this job, I'm not qualified, I shouldn't even send the resume, right? This is what you can do. You can talk back to it and you can say, hey, silly, I'm sure as heck not getting the job while I'm having this conversation with you. So I'm going to send the resume now, or make the phone call, or whatever you got to do, right? Talk back to the voice. You can do that, right? Take the action that is needed. Talk back to the voice, stop it in its tracks, and then take the action. Sometimes I hear the analogy of, this fear, because most of this negativity is driven by fear. And I have the analogy, and I have the image in my brain of when you're driving the car and people can say to that fear, you call it out, you say, look, I know you're here. I know you're in the car with me, but you don't get to sit in the front seat. You're sitting in the back, right? Because that fear, it's always going to be there. It's just part of being human, but we don't have to let it control our lives. So you can say, hey, you go in the back seat or go in the trunk. So one of the other things that I do is I have identified in my head, I call it a judge, right? To me, it's the Grim Reaper. It's the image of the Grim Reaper who's like marching around in my head going, you're terrible, you'll never succeed, right? And so when you can picture it, what does this judge look like in your head, right? Picture it, something negative. Is it a character? Is it a person? Is it an evil entity? What does it look like for you? Give it a visual. You could also name it if you want. So like I said, mine looks like the Grim Reaper. He's walking through my head, telling me all these negative thoughts. And I'm like, go away. So you are not your thoughts. And when you can identify these negative thoughts as a separate entity, then it's going to lose much of its power. So just like anything else, this takes practice. It takes awareness. It takes time. You want to sit with yourself. You want to write down what are the negative thoughts that come up in my head. Maybe you take a little notebook with you throughout your day. And as you notice the thoughts, you write them down. And then at the end of the day, you can review them and you can say, that's interesting. We want to turn around, take one thought at a time and flip it into a positive. Okay. The way we do this is by repetition over time. Again, just like anything else, it takes practice. It's not going to happen overnight, but you can do it. Sometimes we need a smaller anchor thought to bring yourself back when you notice the negative loop, okay? We want to pivot into the positive thought and then into action. So what is an anchor thought that you could use that might redirect you into positive action or to positive thinking? And it might be something as simple as, I can do this. I am good enough. Or it's okay to say no. It's okay to care for me. Whatever that is, and you might have several of them, you want to have those at the ready. So when you notice that negative loop coming up, you're putting out your hand, stop, and then you're saying the positive mantra to get you back into focus. I can do this, right? So what does that mantra sound like for you? That's something to think about. Another thing we can do to get out of our heads and back into our body is to interrupt the loop by doing something tactile. You can close your eyes, rub your palms together. You can take some deep centering breaths. I know we've done that together many times. Wiggle your toes. Become aware of a part of your body. This can stop the loop and get you settled into your body rather than going into that loop in your mind. So start thinking about what you can do to stop that loop, something tactile. I mean, people have stress balls, right? Stress balls or whatever it might be for you. Might be getting a piece of gum and starting to chew on a piece of gum, right? Something to stop the negative loop and pivot. So I am just going to hop into the Q&A here and just see if there are a couple questions. I hope this is helpful. I hope that I'm explaining this well. So this says, this looks like a comment. Your story about how you called 5 different counselors and no one called you back got me very emotional. Thank you for sharing your story. It reminded me of a time where I was really down in life and felt very alone. It helps to hear that someone else went through it too and found a way out. It gives hope. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it was a really hard time. And one of my best friends is a social worker. So I called her and I said, I think I'm going through something. I need some names. She gave me a list and all I got was voicemails. And, everybody's busy these days. I get it. I'm glad that I was enough in a good space that I realized, okay, I have to do something. And I'm glad I reached out for help. And I'm very grateful for my kids. I had to be okay for my kids. They brought me forward as well. The fact that I knew it was so important to me to continue to be a good mom for my kids and to be a better mom for my kids was really also something that really pulled me forward through that time. And yeah, so many of us go through things and we keep them to ourselves. We never know what other people are carrying around. So definitely we're never alone in our pain. And it really does help to reach out. All right, so here's a question here. My home language was not so politically correct. My negative thoughts growing up was, I'm crippled, so I better work harder than others. My family was very loving towards me, but they referred to me as the crippled girl. It's interesting. If I picture my family as a judge, I get the image of loving people who cook amazing food, lots of laughter and fun in the house, but they only had harsh language to describe a physical disability. Wow, I'm sorry that was what stuck with you. I'm so glad that you had loving people with laughter and great food and fun. And yeah, so words can really hurt, right? And that's interesting when you say politically correct, when you were growing up. So the good thing is conversations are changing these days. And what was commonplace when we were growing up is not so commonplace anymore. And generational things are difficult. I've had this recently in my family. Some of the older generation, they still talk and speak in ways that were acceptable or were common 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, but these days are completely unacceptable. So the good thing is, as a society, we are evolving, we are growing, we are understanding how to speak in ways that are supportive and encouraging. And that narrative is changing in society. I'm very glad about that. But that doesn't mean that we're not still traumatized or hurt by how we were brought up years ago. So I hope that you can call out that story in your head and realize if you have any type of disability, you are so much more than your disability. That does not define you. So I'm sure that you know that. And I'm glad you're here today. All right, that is it for the questions today. So I am going to let you go. And this has been day 19. I'm just looking here for day 20. We are going to talk about mental fitness, which is going to springboard right off of this, and how you can create new neural pathways in your brain to focus on the positive and moving forward. So thank you for coming today. This has been a Life Coach University 365 Pay It Forward talk. If you have anything else you want to talk about, or a question I didn't answer, or something you want to go deeper into, please reach out to me. You can reach me at nancybsawyer.com. And as you go about your day today, please pay it forward in whatever way you want. Put a smile on someone else's face today, and have a great day. I'll see you next time.